This is episode 113 of The Variety Artist.
Welcome to The Variety Artist, providing aspiring artists and entertainers with in-depth discussions from top performers from all over the world. So get ready to book some gigs, make some money, and have some fun with your host, John Abrams.
Campus Activities Magazine says one of the most respected and in-demand performers in the campus market. Yes, he's a great entertainer and has garnered many awards, but we're going to talk all about taking your show online, creating that virtual show, not just lighting and cameras and such, but what works and what doesn't, and why. Variety Artist, I give you Michael Kent.
Hey, John.
How's it going, Michael?
It's going very well. Thank you. How are you?
Good. I'm doing great. Now, the last couple of weeks, I had on Chris Michael, who co-wrote Lights, Camera, Magic, and Robert Strong, who was also talking about creating a home studio.
Sure.
So we've heard all about the technical stuff. So what we're going to talk about today is how to make your virtual show good. What works, what doesn't, that type of thing.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
Before we start, when, why, and how did you start doing virtual shows? How many?
So I've done, I've probably done 20 some now. My primary market is college entertainment. I do campus activities market. And March 10th, 11th, and 12th were those 3 days that all of the shows went away.
That will live in infamy, yes.
Yeah, those 3 days were rough. I think it was either on the 13th or the 14th that a campus activities director, a student affairs professional, asked me if I would do a virtual show. And that was my first time even hearing about the concept. I said, yeah, that sounds scary. Let's do it. That sounds awesome. And at that point, they were talking about doing it over Zoom because a lot of campuses have a campus-wide Zoom account. So that Zoom account, which is capable of getting all of the students that go to that college on at one time. And I said, that's great. Let's do it. Started doing research right away. Realized I didn't want to do it over Zoom. I have a little bit more tools and quality on Facebook on YouTube Live.
Yeah.
I decided to do that and started looking into it and immediately said, this is something I can sell. So I put out an email and got tons of response, mostly from people saying, this is a thing that would be great. No one has brought this up yet. And so I'm very, very fortunate that because of that student affairs professional, I was on the forefront of getting that idea out, because as you and I were just talking casually before we started here, this type of studio equipment, live streaming equipment, is really hard to get right now. And I was able to get the few things that I needed to be able to do this show before the rush. So I found, a capture card and a couple other little things here and there that I needed. Very fortunately already had a studio in place in my home. It was just a matter of sort of getting it set up to do a live stream show. And that is all before I even looked at what that show was going to include, which is what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, so you took care of all the technical end. Now, here's a little secret that I kind of discovered accidentally. I went to Amazon to order some different studio equipment, and I looked at page 1, sold out, page 2, sold out, page 3, sold out, page 4, not so much, page 5, not so much. So if you go to page 4 and page 5, you can still get some of the same stuff that's on page 1, but it's not sold out. So there's a little hint for everybody there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've had some friends who have told me they've had good luck going to some other big box stores online. There are places like Walmart and stuff. When you go to their website, they have so much stuff on there that they don't sell in any of the Walmart stores, but they're trying to create this Walmart.com that competes with Amazon.com. You can find stuff on there and actually have it shipped to your home in a world that's very similar to the world we're living on with Amazon.com.
Those are both great ideas. Now let's talk about virtual shows then. To start out, you got all the technical stuff first, and then you started working with the actual show itself.
Yeah.
What is kind of the difference between your virtual show and a live show?
Well, my live show, my stage show, is very heavy on audience interaction, which many of us have built a show that way. We've just found that that's what people want to see.
Yeah.
The interaction is very different when you're talking about someone watching a computer screen. I think that it's important that we compare these shows to what they should be compared to. I don't think that these virtual shows that we do should be compared to the stage shows that we're doing, because our audience is watching a screen. So what these virtual shows should be compared to is the other things they're watching on the screen. Netflix, other YouTube videos, things like this, where it's not about the person that's in the video choosing a card. It's not about what's happening here. It's about the interaction and how this moment makes you feel, how short or long the beats are, these types of things. And I knew right away, looking at my show, while my show is entertaining in a live stage setting, it would not be so performed for a camera. It's just not, the beats aren't quick enough. There's too much exposition. There's too much reliance on one of their friends being on stage, and watching that.
Yeah.
I decided that this wasn't going to be, first of all, just in terms of like the shot composition, they weren't going to be looking at my full body head to toe like they are when I'm on stage.
Yeah.
I wanted this to be closer up, waist up shot. I wanted to be performing several feet from the camera, not 10 to 12 feet from the camera. I think about it this way a lot. When you watch your kids, the video of your kids' school play, it could be the most impressive production. They could be doing Grease in your kid's high school. You have it on video because your kid's in it. When you go back and watch that video, it's only interesting because your kid's in it.
That's right. It's only interesting to you.
You would never watch that if it was all someone else's kids. Like, you would never buy that and watch it.
Yeah.
The reason is it's one shot. It's shot poorly. They're far away. If they were to turn that now into a product that they were going to sell on Netflix and you were going to watch on Netflix, all of a sudden now it would be different camera angles. There would be audio production where the audio is coming straight in instead of, you're hearing it through the speakers into the camera microphone. It changes all of a sudden. And I think that's the way we need to think about these virtual shows. This can't be just a static shot of us standing head to toe, 10 feet, 12 feet away from the camera and performing as if there's an audience there in the room with us and talking to nobody. You have to consider what the medium is and how we go about entertaining people in an era of Netflix and YouTube and Twitch and the way that people are receiving information.
Right. Well, let's go back to a couple of different things. First, the idea of making your routines shorter and quicker and not as much exposition. Let's talk about that a little bit, because when people are watching YouTube and they're watching movies, Netflix, whatever, something's happening every 3 seconds. It's bam, 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 bam. And when we're doing a show, for example, a lot of my routines are 8 minutes long.
Sure.
The magic itself is, of course, only 10 seconds or 12 seconds, but the whole routine is 8 minutes. And I know that's not going to play. That doesn't play on a screen.
What we're talking about, John, is commitment. When you have an audience seated in a theater in front of you, they are committed to paying attention to you. That attention span all of a sudden is a committed 30 minutes, 45 minutes, hour, whatever your show might be. When you're watching YouTube, I don't know. If someone watched my YouTube browsing history, like a video or something, they would think I was a psychopath, because I'm literally switching videos and making up my mind every 10 to 15 seconds. I might look at a video and say, nah, I don't feel like watching that. Okay, let's click the next video. Nah, that's not what I want to see. And so the beats have to be shorter because your audience isn't committed to watching you like they were with a stage performance. And in this, of course, there are factors that might influence that as well. If someone has paid for a ticket to have access to your live stream, then of course they're a little bit more committed than if this is a free show that you're offering on Facebook Live or something along those lines. So you can see, I'm sure all of us have friends who are now offering virtual shows online, and they'll spend a week promoting that show, and you'll tune into the live stream and there will be 6 people watching. It has a lot to do with how long those beats are and whether or not you're doing things to engage your audience within those quick beats. There are things that I would love to do that go out the window, things like callbacks. I can't have a through line in my show like I do in my stage show, where I keep referencing something, because they may have tuned in 10 minutes in and they have no idea what I'm referencing.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, one of the workshops that I do, I teach magic to kids,
Hmm.
and one of the workshops that I do, sometimes I'll do a magic trick first, and then I'll teach the magic trick after. That's kind of the format. But what happens is sometimes some people will tune in late and they'll miss the magic trick. So when I'm actually showing them how to do it, it doesn't make any sense
Yeah.
because they didn't see the first part of it. So it's true. You probably can't have it. I never even thought of that. You can't have a through line of action or a callback because people tune in late.
You can't necessarily do it because people might check out after a certain bit. So you can't set something up that has a big payoff at the end of your show. Like, for instance, if you're a magician and you're doing like a confabulation routine
Mhm.
where those bits of information come throughout the entire 40-minute live stream,
Good luck.
good luck. Yeah, exactly. It would be amazing if that were the case, but it's not like watching a film. A film, you're committed. This is more like watching a late night TV show.
Hmm.
If you tune halfway into a Jimmy Fallon show and he's interviewing a guest, it's okay that you didn't see the monologue because it's written in segments.
Right.
So you can tune into this segment or that segment, and especially now that they have more viewers on the internet than they do on the broadcast, those segments get put out there by themselves. Just
Mm.
like, Saturday Night Live, you're watching one sketch on YouTube the next day versus an entire hour show all at once.
Sure.
I would love to be able to put some of these callbacks and through lines and things in my show, but it's just not necessarily possible because I want everyone that tunes in to feel what the show is and to know what the show is. They might only tune in for 3 minutes or 5 minutes. I do a 60-minute show as my virtual magic show that I sell to colleges.
Mhm.
I was looking at one the other day. I can go back and look at the analytics, which is another thing that we can talk about. But I looked at the analytics, and on one that I did recently, the average view time was 20 minutes.
Oh,
Now, there are a lot of people that are there for the whole show, but then there are people who come in and they might watch 5 minutes and then go do something else.
yeah.
And so that average sort of takes it down to this middle point of 20 minutes. I don't think there are many people watching for 20 minutes. I think it's a lot more of either quick viewers or
Sure.
they're watching the whole show. It's interesting to see.
Well, let's talk about those analytics because this is
Yeah.
something I hadn't considered. How are you looking at those analytics?
Well, I mean, I wish that I had these for my stage shows. I wish that I had the ability to, have everyone with a little dial in their hand like they do during the presidential debates. We're like, I
Oh, yeah.
liked this, let's turn the dial this way. I didn't like this, let's turn the dial this way. I can go through, and I do this after every show. I can look at the curve of engagement. I can see when the most people were watching, when the most people were chatting, where the playbacks started. All these different tools, especially YouTube Live, is really thorough.
Where are you going to get all that information?
There are two different places that you can look on YouTube itself. If you're watching the playback of your video and you're logged into your account, there is a button right next to your edit button that allows you to watch the analytics.
Ah, okay.
And if it's a live stream and you're watching it back, there are 3 major sections of analytics on that section. You have playbacks, you have let's see. I'm trying to do this off the top of my head. Definitely the middle one is chatting. The third one is playbacks. And the first one I think is just your views.
Mhm.
But then if you go into like you were going to edit the video in your YouTube studio, the analytics there are vast. I mean, they have a metric on everything. It will break it down into what device people were using to watch you. It'll
Oh,
break
wow.
it down into what country they're from, gender, age group, all the demographics that they have. You can see these on your videos. But the most important thing is you can actually watch the video on the top of the pane, and on the bottom of the pane, see a graph with engagement and how many people were watching at any given minute in your video. So
Wow.
you can see, oh, well, there's a 9% dip here, or there's a 9 viewers dipped off right here. And you can
Right.
see what you were doing. And then maybe for the next show, you can do something to raise interest, even if it's like a on-screen graphic or
Mhm.
asking people a question that they can answer that promotes engagement. You can do things to try to keep that level at the very top. Every 4 or 5 seconds, something really exciting needs to be happening on the screen. I put a call in right when I first started doing this to a few of my friends. And I know that Xavier Spade is just awesome on YouTube. He's just
Okay.
really good at putting together YouTube videos, and he has a ton of followers. And I called him, and that's one of the things he said to me. He said, look at the most popular YouTubers. Everything is changing every like 4 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
There's never just a static screen with them talking about a story for 10 minutes. That just doesn't happen.
If you don't have the technical skills, or you don't have all the software to be zooming in and zooming out and doing all of those things, what are the best practices
Absolutely.
to keep those things flowing?
The shot of you from the waist up in front of the camera doing a stand-up style magic trick looks very different than if you take 2 steps forward and perform a close-up trick a foot from the lens or 6 inches from the lens. The lighting is different. It's 2 very different looking things on the screen. So if you don't have the ability to use some software to do camera switching or use various cameras, which in my show, I do everything from one camera. I use OBS Studio, and I'm actually setting up different shot compositions within that one camera, so I can do a zoomed in shot, or if I know I'm going to have graphics on the right side of the screen, I can have a shot where I'm more centered on the left side of the screen.
Okay.
Depending on what your lighting situation is, I think you can get some really nice looking shots. I think it's beautiful when you're doing a shot with your hands right in front of the camera.
Oh, with no face or anything?
With no face or anything necessarily. Let me preface this by this. I don't really like top-down table shots that don't have your face in them. I'm not interested in those personally, and so I decided not to put those in my show. I understand that there's some magic that needs a table to work. You need to be able to see a ribbon spread of cards on a table in order to understand what's happening. That's not what I wanted. But what I'm talking about is more of a stand-up style where my hands are closer to the lens and my body is further away. It provides a lot of depth, and I think it's visually a really interesting shot, especially if your hands and your body are lit differently. Your lampshades at home can provide pretty great lighting options if you don't have soft boxes and if you don't have LED panels and different things. You can do a lot of stuff just by Googling 3-point lighting and trying to understand kind of the reasoning why that works.
One of the things that I've discovered is that when I'm doing close-up things, sometimes I will use a table or something to hold my props.
Sure.
It's much more difficult, and I have to practice a number of times doing it in front of the camera, holding it up.
Yeah, in the first few virtual shows I did, I was doing a move where one hand was holding my phone up to the camera.
Okay.
And while that was happening, my other hand was behind it doing a move with the Rubik's Cube that was hidden by the phone. And I'm taking a 3-inch object and manipulating a different 3-inch object sort of behind it. And you can't really practice that type of thing except for in front of the camera.
Right.
It was really difficult to do. I ended up completely getting rid of it and changing it for a different bit. But those types of things take practice, just like they do. We owe it to ourselves to practice these things just like we do for the stage.
Right.
Give it up for weathermen. They've been doing this type of stuff for forever.
Yeah, with the green screen and everything.
How many times have I gone to point at a prop on the shelves behind me and I point the wrong direction?
Oh, I still do that. I do that all the time. Still.
It takes work. I'm finally just starting to understand the relationship between what I'm looking at and where I'm at, spatially. That brings up another point. I just wanted to say it's really important, I think, to have a monitor close to where the camera lens is. I just happened to have an old TV that I wasn't using anymore, and I put it on a table, and it sits right under the camera lens. So if I need to read something or if I need to check the shot, I can just glance down briefly and then look right back up into the lens.
Because looking into the lens is important. I talked to Robert Strong about that last week, how important that is as opposed to looking at your screen. Because when you're looking at your screen, you're not really looking at the person. You are looking at the person, but when you're looking at the camera, you're actually making eye contact with the person.
I notice it all the time, even when people take iPhone videos. You can see the difference between them looking at the lens on the iPhone and something that's only an inch away, which is their picture, you can see that difference. There's definitely a connection that you make when you look into the lens of the camera, and it's hard to do, especially if you're getting used to monitoring yourself on a screen. You keep looking down. I did a show once for, God, it was probably 7,000 people in the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the audience was just watching me on a screen, and there were screens hung throughout the exhibit hall
Mm-hmm.
from the ceiling. And I have video of that show. And when I watch it back, there are so many times I catch myself just watching myself in the monitors and not looking at the camera lens at all. It makes me cringe, and it was because I'm not used to doing that. I wasn't used to doing it at that time. And to me, I was making sure that I was in frame. I wanted to see what the shot looked like. And so I was completely not connecting with that camera lens, and therefore not with all of those people that were watching.
So you weren't connecting with anybody, not the audience or
just myself. I was just connecting with myself.
How do I look?
Yeah.
Well, give us some ideas, since we're talking about, talking to people and talking in the lens. Give us some ideas on how to connect with a virtual audience as opposed to, of course, a live audience.
My wife pointed this out when I did some video of what I thought what my virtual show was going to be, and I showed it to her. And she's not a director of my show at all, but she gives me a really great layperson's opinion sometimes and tells me things that I don't notice.
Yeah.
She said, when you were talking at the camera, you kept looking away off into the distance, and it made me not believe you. I think the reason I was doing that is because it was uncomfortable to talk to a camera lens. It really just took practice. So I think that talking to the lens as if it's somebody that's in the room, almost like it's a friend of yours who you're having a conversation with, is really important. I've also heard people say, talk to the lens as if someone is several feet behind it. And that tends to help me as well. It's like I'm looking through the lens and projecting to, I don't really know the specifics of why that works, but it seems to work pretty well.
I guess that's something that you could test.
Yeah, absolutely.
Record yourself and look directly into the lens, and then also record yourself looking past the lens.
And not only that, I have a piece of paper taped to my camera right next to the lens that says smile.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. And it's just a neat little reminder, even if it's not a routine where I want to be smiling, I could be telling a heartfelt story or something like that. But if I have a little piece of paper that I'm reading from that's literally right next to the lens, it will remind me to look up at the camera and stop looking at the monitor. That's just in terms of, connecting, and the material has to come first. You have to have engaging content before the conversation of connecting with the lens even really happens, I think.
That's one of the things I was going to ask. I mean, I go through my show, and of course, my live show has tons of volunteers, just like yours does. So how can we connect with the people that are watching with our routines? Or maybe you have some examples of some routines where you're actually connecting with the audience.
You know who's doing really well with this is Charlie Fry. I think all of us by now have seen Charlie's videos he's been putting out. He does such a great job. And his last couple with it were they were flea circus videos. And if you haven't seen these, they're on Facebook, and he's just doing such a great job. That's stuff that he can't do on stage. It's a flea circus.
Yeah.
He's moving around from set to set. He's playing to the camera, and he's choosing material that the camera can see well. I'm trying to choose routines that aren't created for the stage. Like, there are certain things that I do on stage because you need to do that on stage. Like, for instance, when I do a rope trick, the rope trick exists the way that it does because it should be seen by a lot of people. I'm doing that same rope trick in the show, but I had to make changes because there were certain things I was doing that I only was doing because I needed to for people to be able to see them on stage. And one of those was the lengths of the rope. There's no reason the length of the rope needs to go down to my knees when I'm doing it for the camera. In fact, it's best if the ropes, the entire length of the rope is in frame the entire time. I don't want the length of the rope to hang underneath the bottom of the frame. So I completely redid the lengths of the rope for my rope routine that everything stays in frame. When I'm not holding the rope, I put it into an empty wine glass on a table, so even that's in frame. Just like when your hand goes into your pocket, someone might be able to accuse you of doing some dirty work there, or same goes for if something drops out of frame.
In fact, one of my listeners, Eddie Rice Jr., owner of A Number One Best Events, asked, how do you keep the audience from suspecting camera trickery? And I guess you just answered that question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one thing you can do. There are also ways that we can prove things that we do in our live shows, but we have to do it differently now. For instance, if you're doing a borrowed bill routine, well, we're not borrowing a bill anymore.
Right.
So now we have to use our own bill. And what are the ways that we prove it? There are basically three things, right? We tear a corner, we memorize a serial number, or we write on the bill.
Right.
So memorizing the serial number works. It's probably not very interesting for a video. Tearing a corner, nah. I like writing on the bill, but rather than me writing my name or even writing someone who's watching's name, I want it to be real time. So what I do is I point out someone who's watching, I call them by their screen name, and I tell them to tell me a random word. And then I write that random word on the bill. And I've seen a friend of mine, Peter Bois, is also doing virtual shows in the college market. He's doing a card trick this way where he's asking people for a picture that he can draw on the card.
Right.
That way, when the bill appears wherever it is or the card appears wherever it is in this impossible location routine, they know that this is the one from right now because that's the information that they know you just got. So it's just another way of proving it.
Sure.
On top of that, I think pointing out things that we might not normally have to point out is important. For instance, I have an egg in my impossible location routine, and I will say in the beginning, I want you to notice this egg. And it's not going to leave the frame. Well, in a stage show, I think that they would know if someone came out on stage and put an egg on the stage.
Yeah.
But on a camera, they're used to things kind of like what your listener said. They're used to things being trickery. So I'll point out that egg and say, this egg is going to stay in frame the whole time. It's going to be right there over my shoulder. It will never move. I'll be much more blatant with some of the proofs in that way. I'll say this bill will never leave the frame of this camera. You'll be able to see it the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be afraid to add exposition in that way.
Well, and that's so short and quick too.
Yeah, that doesn't, there's no story. And that's the thing I kind of miss is building more of a longer story around some of these things. But this type of magic just has to be more visual than cerebral, I guess.
What's the deal with copyrighted material? Because a lot of us are using copyrighted material, especially music, during our live shows.
So when I started researching into this, because my stage show has, my theme song is a kind of a spoof on a very popular song. And it's close enough in sound that it will get flagged. It'll get a copyright strike on like YouTube or Instagram or Facebook, all of which have computer AI algorithms that flag copywritten material.
Yeah.
So there are many resources for rights-free music out there. For my virtual show, all of the music is rights-free music. One of the ones that I really enjoy is Pond 5. It's the pond like a lake, POND, and the number 5.com. Those are purchased music. So you go on there and you might spend $20 for a song or $10 for a song. You can really get into the details on how you want that song to feel when you start doing their parametric search on their website. You can say, I want something that's bright and happy. I want something that's under 2 minutes.
Right.
If you don't want to spend any money, there are resources for that as well. And one that I never knew about until just recently is YouTube itself. So YouTube itself has an audio library that it's not the most extensive, but there's pretty good music on there.
The only reason I know about that is because I just used it.
Yeah.
3 days ago, and I put together my set list because I use copyrighted music. And now I have an entire set of YouTube music, and it sounds great.
You can go in GarageBand or Audacity or whatever software you're using and edit that music as well if you want for your purposes, which is something I've done. I took a 4-minute song that I grabbed off of that YouTube audio library, and I looped it continuously for 15 minutes because I do anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes of a lobby waiting time before the show.
Okay.
That gives me a few minutes to be able to take that video and post it to the places where I need to post it after it's gone live.
Mm-hmm.
And it also allows me to build a few people, an audience of watchers to come in. I wanted music that can last through that whole thing. So yeah, I have a 15-minute audio. I never play a whole 15 minutes of it, but it just continues to loop like a bed of music that plays. And that's just rights-free music that I've edited.
Yeah.
It's important because if you upload copywritten music on YouTube or Facebook as a video, you might get a notice later that day or even in a few hours that tells you your video has been removed, your video can't be viewed in whatever countries, your video can't be viewed mobile, or you just can't monetize your video. On live videos, they can actually stop your broadcast.
Oh,
and that
that's
would
a
be
nightmare.
the worst thing to happen, right? Like, can you imagine doing a show for 200 people live and all of a sudden it's just gone?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's no recovering from that, right? So I think it's another thing that we have to consider because we don't have the venue paying those royalty fees for us like we do in a stage performance. And that goes for video too, by the way. In addition to my virtual show, I'm doing a live stream every Tuesday night for free that's called Joke, Story, Trick, where I do exactly that. I tell a joke, I tell a story, I do a trick, and I bring in guests and everything. And one of the parts is I get a weird internet video, and I take my guest and we discuss the weird internet video.
Yeah.
Which is something that's covered under fair use law because we're critiquing or making commentary on a piece. That said, it still gets a copyright flag on it because I'm taking a video that is from the internet that someone owns the rights to, and the AI will flag that. And so you have to actually dispute that if you want to monetize it. It's a whole thing.
Right, because a human is not looking at that, and AI is. Yeah.
Especially now when everyone's working with skeleton crews in their businesses. I don't know what YouTube is doing, and I'm sure everyone's working from home.
I would think.
I think it's less actual human eyes on this content, more AI.
Yeah, I'm sure. So it's best just to grab that non-copyrighted material, the stuff from YouTube audio, or
yeah, and it's easy enough to find. You just have to spend a few minutes Googling for it, throw it into your sound system, whatever you're using, and even if you're playing it from a boombox on the floor, which is how I started my first few virtual shows a few weeks ago.
I just told you right before we got on here, I just bought a soundboard. So I'm trying to figure out how it all works, and it all attaches to my phone, and it's wonderful, but it's going to take some time.
Yeah, it's fun. I've been spending a few hours every day down here in the studio improving it. For instance, the first problem was I didn't want to do the boombox on the floor. And so then I had to figure out how to get system audio into my computer while importing a different source of audio. And I finally got it to the point where I'm really happy with the sound, and I'm really happy with the production. But that's for today. Tomorrow I won't be happy, and I'll be doing something else to it.
At the very beginning of this whole COVID-19 thing, we could get away with that boombox on the floor. But as things are progressing, people are getting better and better technically putting things together. So 2 months, we're about 2 months in now. All of a sudden, you have to have sound coming directly into your computer. You can't have speakers.
Yeah,
out.
That's definitely true. There is a shallowing of the curve of whatever like production quality there is. Everyone's going to be a lot more similar in production quality, and everything's going to be great. But it still comes down to how engaging is your content, because you could have the most amazing production quality in the world, but if you're not engaging a live audience, why are you doing it live in the first place? If you're not talking to the chat, why would they watch your show and just not go watch, Justin Willman on Netflix? Like why are we doing this in the first place? The reason we're doing it in the first place is because this is promoting the community that we're all missing from being in a room together. And so you have to find a way to make your material promote that same community, whether it's through polls that you have on chat, whether it's through bringing live people via Zoom onto your screen, or however you're doing it. That's the whole point of this, is maintaining connection with your audience.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the polls and things, because I think what a lot of people miss, and I haven't put this in my show yet, but I've thought about it a lot, is engaging people through the chat and through different manners without doing your particular art. So if you're doing a poll in the chat, it isn't necessarily magic. It isn't necessarily ballooning or whatever it is that you do, but you're engaging the people and making them part of your show. And you can take 5 minutes and do that in your show.
Yeah, or play a game with them,
Right.
And I do this in my other live stream show where I started off right by asking a question, and I want to get people just engaging and interested. Why not say, hey, we can either do this or we can do this in the show next? What would you like to see? If you want to see this, press 1 in the comments. If you want to see this, press 2 in the comments. There are a multitude of things that we can sort of lift from things that happen in the gaming community that are already happening on Twitch. And there are even platforms built for this type of thing to be able to, there are chat bots and everything that can take different poll answers and make different things happen on screen with those poll answers. There's really a lot of room for creativity here. We magicians are not the first ones to solve this problem. There were people live streaming 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And this was one of the things that Brian Brushwood said to me. He said, it's kind of surreal to see everyone scrambling to solve all the same problems we had to solve when we started doing this forever ago. I see a lot of magicians selling courses on how to do a live stream magic show. And I'm like, I get it, and I have another friend that said, you have to respect the hustle, and I get that, but there are a lot of free resources out there by people who have been live streaming in other industries, primarily gaming, for a long time. And there's a lot of stuff on the internet for free that can be learned from those people. And you just have to have a little bit of creativity to say, how can I make that work with the theme of a magic show?
All right, well, let's get off the virtual magic show for a little while.
Sure.
You have a product that I've seen on Facebook. I haven't actually seen the entire product. The microphone management for magicians, that's yours, right?
It is, yeah. Who knew when I spent the last 8 months making myself into a handheld microphone expert that no one would need a handheld microphone for the next 8 months? Ridiculous.
I don't mean to laugh, but it is kind of ironic, isn't it?
Well, what do they say? Man planned, God laughed, or something like that. I started using a handheld microphone 10 years ago on stage, and I had switched from, I'd used a head worn, and I'd used a lav mic and all these things. Ken Weber has a quote, and Alon New was the one that told it to me. He said, if you can use a handheld mic, you can work any room in the world. And I didn't understand it, but now that I use a handheld mic in my live stage show, I'll never go back. It's something that I'm really adamant about. And it's not about just the sound. It's about the sound. It's about the look. It's about the prevalence. It's about using it as a tool. And I go through all of these things in this lecture video that I made. It's a live lecture video I did at Brent Braun's magic shop and studio in New Albany, Indiana. It literally just addresses everything that you can imagine when it comes to using a handheld mic, and why I think it's so important to use a handheld mic if you're doing a stand-up style show on stage. Yeah, it's microphonemanagement.com is the URL. Now's a great time to learn, because there is going to be a time.
Yeah, there will be a time when it comes back.
Your mic isn't packed away in your case. You've got it in your basement ready to go, and it's a good time to practice using one, learning how to social distance with a microphone.
Yeah, Dal Sanders, who's a magician, you probably know him. He just did his first live magic show. It's the first one I've seen.
Wow, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, he did a show where the entire audience it was a small audience, but they had to stay 6 feet apart, and he had to stay 20 feet away from, I think, the audience, something like that. But yeah, it was the first one that I had seen. Someone actually did a live show.
That's incredible. I've got some that are being booked. We're booking them, but they're still, I think the first one that I have that's actually an in-person show that they want is in September. And even that, I still don't know if it'll, if it'll actually happen. Well, it's so hard to even think about these things because stuff changes from day to day. But there are ways that I've been thinking about changing some of the things I do on stage just to accommodate people's trust and safety. The world has changed, and people aren't as giving with their handshakes and grabbing items that you've previously held. And
exactly. Props and volunteers. Those are my two big things. All right, we're going to switch gears a little bit to fact or something John just made up. Sound like fun?
Sure, absolutely.
Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to give you a headline. You can tell me whether the headline is true or not. And if it does, or if it is true, tell me a little more about it.
Is it fact? Or is it something John just made up?
First headline. Michael was once stranded in the demilitarized zone, DMZ, between North and South Korea.
That is actually true.
Oh,
It's kind of crazy. I've done 5 tours overseas now performing for the troops. That was my first one. And that was the very last stop of the tour. I spent a month performing shows for the Army in Korea.
mhm.
And the last show we did was at Camp Boniface, which is in the DMZ, in the demilitarized zone, which is a surreal combination of tourism and razor wire and machine guns. It's super weird.
Oh, weird.
It's a very long story, but the short of it is we were on a bus we had to change buses like 4 or 5 times. You go from your bus driver to the base bus driver to the UN bus driver to all these different things. And this guy dropped us off in the wrong place in the middle of the DMZ on a walking path. There's no fence between North and South Korea. It's like 4 kilometers wide with a fence on either side. And we didn't know where we were in relation to the base we were supposed to be at. It was just me and my friend. And after walking around aimlessly for a while, just scared out of our wits, a staff sergeant ran by, and he was just doing some like PT or something. He ran by and he said, "Holy expletive, what are you guys doing here?"
Yeah, what are you doing in the middle of DMZ?
And he said, "Come with me, stay with me." And we had already done a tour of the DMZ where we had to do a briefing and had been warned, what to do and what not to do. And this would have been on the list of what not to do.
Yeah.
And when I told the person who was in charge for me being there, who shall remain nameless to preserve her innocence, she got really angry with us. And I was like, it wasn't my fault. We couldn't even speak to the guy. He spoke Korean. Yeah, but we eventually got where we were supposed to be, and I don't think I really understood the true danger of the situation until I thought back on it.
That's a life or death situation, huh?
I guess it could have been, yeah.
Could have been. Yeah. All right, next headline. Ironically, one of Michael's signature tricks is making a computer disappear.
Well, that one is not true.
Okay.
That one is not true. And it's a good thing too, because God, I feel bad for folks who may not have, the equipment and the computer to deal with the stuff that we're having to deal with right now. I've been very fortunate.
And they can't order it right now unless they go to page 4 or Walmart.com.
That's right.
All right, last one. Michael is the voice behind the "Please drive forward" announcement in car washes.
Oh, that one is actually true.
Oh, how did that come about?
I was sitting on an airplane once, flying to a gig and having a conversation with the guy next to me. And he said, "Do you do voiceovers?" I said, "No, but I've always been curious about it." And he said, "You should, because your vocal style is a very niche vocal style that could be wanted in these specific industries." And it turned out he set me up with a union who set me up with an agent when I went and recorded a demo. And now my targeted niche is industrial warnings. So sometimes if you're crossing the street on a crosswalk and you hear "walk," there's sometimes that's me.
Oh,
You can hear me in, I think it's something like 700 or 800 car washes across the country now saying, "Please drive forward."
oh yeah, I think I've heard that. I've heard that.
So that's me. I'm actually, my voice is on the cockpit of a lot of airplanes saying stuff like "oil pressure low," and you don't want to hear my voice in that instance. But yeah, it's a weird niche that I got into. I've done stuff like radio commercials and things. That's just sort of where I've seen the most success with voiceover, is this really strange, weird way that people know me but don't know me.
I love that. So your demo video is like, "Please drive forward, walk."
The moving walkway is about to end.
That was fact. Or something John just made up.
that's it. Thanks for doing my show. That was great.
Absolutely, man. Thanks a lot. It's been a blast to be on here. I listen to the show all the time. I've had a lot of good friends who have been on, and I always pick up a couple nuggets. So
if you can pick up 1 or 2 nuggets from each one, hey, it's a day well spent.
Sure thing.
Yeah. Do you have any social media or anything else you'd like to promote before I let you go?
Absolutely. My all of my social media is just my name. It's just Michael Kent. Mm-hmm. My YouTube is Michael Kent Live, so you can check that out.
Well, thanks for doing my show.
Yeah, thanks, John.
And thanks to all my variety artists. Tell your friends about the Variety Artist Podcast. Make sure to rate and review the show from wherever you're listening to this. Hit that little 5-star thingy, and if you have a minute, leave a quick review. Now go out and book those gigs, make some money, and have some fun.
That's all for this episode of The Variety Artist, but your journey continues on our website. Go to thevarietyartist.com for more strategies, insight, and resources, as well as show notes on today's guest to assist you in your career. We'll see you on the next episode of The Variety Artist. But until then, go out and book those gigs, make some money, and have some fun.